Welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. And today I have Kyle Kammer from Concrete Strategies. Kyle is the Director of Quality. That's it. I'm not going to add any more to it, Kyle. All right. Like I've been sharing with you guys the last handful of episodes. If you get some value out of Kyle's episode today, our discussion, and you want to support the podcast, I got 3 ways you can support the podcast. The first way is you can share this episode with a colleague in the concrete industry. The second way is if you go to concretelogicpodcast.com, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little microphone icon there. If you click on that microphone, it allows you to leave me a voicemail, and you can give me feedback on the podcast. If there's a topic or guest that you would like to hear on the podcast, you can also do it that way. You can also just email me at seth@concretecast.com as well. And the third way is back on that homepage, concretelogicpodcast.com. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a donate button. If you get some value out of this podcast or any of the other episodes, you can donate any amount that you feel it's worth. So with that, Kyle, we're going to talk about Type 1L cement, a favorite topic of the concrete industry. Why is that, Kyle? Why do we like to talk about Type 1L cement?
Well, obviously it's new and exciting. We've had a lot of heartburn in the industry in general with the change. We're a slow industry, construction in general, to accept change. That's a big part of it. There have been a few hiccups along the way as far as material quality and the general rollout process that affected some people more than others. So obviously that's been a huge issue over the last couple of years. That's for much longer than that. Certain areas like the Northwest have been using it for five plus years at this point, and they've figured it out. So the rest of us just have to catch up.
Yeah. So you were sharing before we hit record that you're seeing, well, your job, you're traveling all across the country because Concrete Strategies is a national company, and you get to see how things are going with the Type 1L cement throughout the country, which we all know, folks that are in the industry, that concrete is very localized product. You know, when concrete is produced, it's used with local products in the area, and so it's very challenging when we're using a new cement that the cement folks dropped on us. So here in the last couple of years, to figure things out, because one thing that's going on in one part of the country, if you're having issues, not necessarily going to have the same issues somewhere else in the country, right?
Yeah, and honestly, it varies from area to area, but also over time, the cement companies are still trying to figure things out. They have been, I think, most of them on track now. But they were also tweaking things on the production end, and that obviously trickles down to the end user. So,
yeah. So can you share, you spoke at ACI and you talked about some of the issues you were seeing and how to troubleshoot those issues. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, so we did a mini session that was myself, Rob Young with Lithco, one of the professors from Oregon State, Jason Weiss.
He's a big name.
Yeah, that's why there's a Weiss and a Weiss anyway.
Yeah.
Ben works for Green Umbrella. They're a chemical company. So, and we kind of tried to tackle some of these issues. Obviously, change and issues, people get frustrated, and have been a lot of stones thrown, for lack of a better term. And, we were really trying to approach it from the contractor's point of view, at least, Rob and I, present the problems, but also, kind of present, hey, here's kind of the things that we had to do in certain cases. Obviously, like you said, it's going to be different all around the country. You might have the same problem, but there may be different reasons for the same problem. The things we did to try to overcome those and hopefully head them off next time. We focused on 3 main issues, which were cracking, some of the differential set things we've been seeing, low breaks. Low breaks are a big one because that's our method of acceptance. Differential set kind of affects our finishing crews, and then the cracking piece is just, owners don't like cracks. Everyone wants a crack-free floor, and they don't. Anytime most of them see cracks, it seems to be a pretty big trigger. So, but yeah, we gave a few examples of projects around the country where we were seeing issues, and tried to look at these things in your mix design, try some different chemicals. A lot of the admixtures that we have in the industry weren't designed to work with 1L. Turns out 1L is a different product. So you were going to have a different reaction compared to what you were used to. And a lot of those, we ended up having to go back to concrete before admixtures, and we basically peeled everything out and just put all the water in. We slowly added things back in to figure things out. The differential set thing there was some interesting reactions with some of the super plasticizers out there, and that one, honestly, it's still kind of a mystery in some areas, but we both, Lithgow and Concrete Strategies, both had a few pretty bad experiences where we poured a slab, finished it, burned it in, and then once we rolled the saw cut cart out on there, all of a sudden the saw cart breaks through the surface and it's plastic underneath the hard burned in surface. A lot of that was trying to remove some of the chemicals and do the things that we needed to do as contractors, make sure our subgrade was okay, it wasn't too cold, it wasn't too hot. And then, low breaks, those are always painful to deal with because you have to go explain yourself to the owner engineer, and we got some tolerance of it, but at the end of the day, can you accept this? Even though it's 500 or 1,000 psi low, it's not a good look for anyone. But we had some pretty interesting projects where we were able to see the mix transition from 1.2 to 1L in real time. We were seeing decreases in strength off of mixes that we had been using for years. Obviously, there's a reason for that. When something changes and you all of a sudden have a bunch of issues, and it's kind of easy to pick out that one change. It wasn't necessarily just because of the material changing. It was also because we weren't adjusting the way we're handling it. When things change, we have to change the way we do things as well. And that I don't think was, I don't think we were necessarily ready for in the contractor side of things. But we, again, we're trying to get over them as much as we can. A lot of the big issues there were more communication related. We've had several suppliers switch their source, but they never communicated that to us. They just, batched it with, they just replaced, hey, we got 560 pounds of this, we're going to change to 560 pounds of that. So everything's going to work the same way. Well, it doesn't necessarily work like that. Like I said, it's a different material. So we got to be ready to treat things differently. A lot of it, I think, goes back to the variation in some of the material sources. And Concrete Strategies is a part of Clayco, and Clayco has a very robust quality control program, system department, and they do a lot of data tracking with many of their material sources. Specifically with concrete, we were able to get into that database and start looking at some of the material chemical properties that are listed on the mill certs, but they got a full-time data entry guy or two that are basically just putting these things in. And we were able to see some interesting trends and massive variability from source to source, supplier to supplier, but even month to month, same supplier, same source. We were seeing significant jumps in a lot of the material properties. When you change one thing from month to month, that's going to affect you on the back end. So the blame numbers were a big one, but we just 1L limestone, so a little extra limestone in the cement. We were seeing significant swings into limestone percentage. Obviously, the limestone, crushed limestone, is going to act differently than clinker will. That was just trying to diagnose the issues and head off problems in the future. We definitely learned the value of looking a little closer at our mill certs, trying to get updated mill certs, which we always probably had done, but maybe didn't focus on it as much as we should.
Were you seeing, when you were looking at those mill certs on the cement, you mentioned the limestone content. Were you seeing a big swing in the percentage of it? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so we looked, and obviously everybody's going to make their product a little bit differently. Like you said, they're dealing with local materials. The limestone that they use to make cement in Florida is not going to be the same as in Missouri or Washington or California or Maine or Canada for that matter. Let alone some of the outside sources. I mean, we have a lot of imported cement in the U.S. from places like Turkey or Vietnam. But yeah, we've seen the entire gamut. We've seen 6% limestone contents. We've seen 15% limestone contents, everywhere in between. The ASTM that 1L falls under allows you to go up to 15%. The old one was 0 to 5. Again, that's one of the challenges of us working across the country. It's not like we're dealing with one material source and one concrete supplier all the time. We're dealing with new folks that we haven't worked with before. And so it's kind of hard to tell what to expect when you're used to seeing an 8% limestone content over here, and I go do a job in Florida and I've got 14.7. Is that going to be different? Probably. So
I guess when you're working through this and you're troubleshooting this, do you find it falls on the ready mix producer, or does it go back to the engineer who did the mix design requirements?
So that's kind of a complicated one. A lot of it has to do with communication. The 1L is a different material. It's a change in materials. And that being said, our mix design has now changed if you've changed from 1.2 to 1L. And that was probably the first major communication issue that we were seeing was it was kind of the assumption early on. It was kind of the selling point, like, this isn't going to be any different, right? We're going to have a 1-to-1 replacement. Whatever you have here is going to be the same over here. And I think a lot of the ready mix suppliers, maybe the more local guys, were, they had to take that at its word because they don't have a big lab with a bunch of QC personnel to do their own testing and trialing. So they just did that. And in several cases, we're not told. And all of a sudden, you have a whole slab pour that is a different color, or it doesn't finish correctly, or finishes slower, sets faster. There's a range of different issues or changes we were seeing, and not necessarily issues, but definitely changes. The first thing was an issue, but we didn't know what to expect from the contractor side of things because we heard about this. Okay, 1L, they say it's going to be the same, it should be the same, but when it turned out not to be, that obviously that kind of caused a lot of heartburn.
The communication was one way coming from the cement producers and going to the ready mix guys. And then we were hearing rumblings from the ready mix guys, the producers, saying, hey, this is going to change. But there was no what does that mean? And like you mentioned, that was the PCA. We can go back and find communication and documentation of them telling it was a 1-for-1 replacement, and that's what everybody went by.
I will say there's been a lot more movement. I'm not trying to pile onto the PCA. There's been a lot of really positive movement from them to try to get back and address the issues of late. And there were some cement suppliers that really did it the right way. I'll kind of throw Wholesome out there as a good example. At least the Wholesome mill in our area, they basically sent a notice out to all of their customers a couple years ago. We're going to change from this to this in 6 months. Just a heads up, come get samples. We'll help you out with any tweaks you have to make your mix designs. And it went smoothly. Knock on wood, we really hadn't had any issues from the Wholesome group, the Wholesome mill that we use for a lot of our material or our ready mix in this area. We had one minor issue with it, but they communicated and were upfront. We called a ready mix supplier. They got Wholesome on the phone, and the next day, both of them were in our office saying, hey, let's try to figure this out. What do we need to do? Whereas that didn't happen with a lot of the other suppliers. I don't think Wholesome is part of the PCA, but some of the bigger players within the PCA have been taking that to heart. I know SMX and some of the other ones have reached out or done their own investigations into some of this stuff and trying to solve issues. So
you can't say it's new anymore. It's been around for a while, and everyone's switched over now. What are you saying?
So I know Phoenix has not. That whole area, sulfate, ASR issues, with the soils down there. I don't think the 1L has gotten certified, or it might have, but it would have been just recently. I know none of our current jobs down there have any 1L. It's still the type 2.5. Sulfate resistance obviously is kind of critical down there. There's a couple other areas of the country where it's similar to that. Interesting, like California, which I would have thought would have been the first ones to jump on the 1L train because of the sustainability angle, but I think they were less than 30% of the cement in California was 1L. I don't know what the issue is there. Certain areas of the country are like fully adopted 100%, and then certain areas aren't. I know some of the Northeast sources are, and then some still import 1.2 from Turkey or other areas. Cement Quebec, I think, has switched over just recently. It's an interesting barrel we've got because, like you said, it's not the same everywhere. It adds to the challenge with you at Baker and me at Concrete Strategies and Litco's, some of the other larger players that do work in various areas of the country that, you can't make any assumptions about anything acting the same.
Yeah. Let's talk about troubleshooting. Go back to troubleshooting. So you're troubleshooting, let's say low breaks, and usually low breaks, the solution is add more cement.
Add more cement.
So is that what we ended up doing?
No.
We added more type 1L cement?
So in a couple cases, yeah, but even if it's all 1L and you've been on 1L for the entire duration, there 5 to 15% is a pretty big window to hit in that ASTM. And we had one case in particular where we had a very high limestone cement, and the gradations of the cement are now becoming important. We had a 4,500 PSI paving mix. I was in Virginia down south. We were struggling to hit 4,000 PSI at 28 days with 840 pounds of cementitious, 600 some odd pounds of cement, and the rest was fly ash. In the olden days, that's an 8,000 PSI mix, and we were struggling to hit 4,000. So we started looking into it. We had to add more water. We had one iteration where the management on site did what you just said. Hey, just add a half a sack. That's all we need to do. And myself and our materials engineer I've got on staff here, we kind of took a look at it. We've already got, you're talking about having almost 900 pounds of cement. That should be double what you need. So we ended up just saying, leave that cement out and add more water. But turns out we added some water. They played around with the super plasticizer a little bit on the mix end, but yeah, the water helped. So in some cases where you have, sometimes it's the higher limestone contents, but not always. It's not always a true indicator, but a lot of times when they're doing that, it's being ground a lot finer, and so you can look at your blane numbers for that. And that kind of indicates the fineness to some degree. The finer your particles, the more surface area you're going to have in your mix that your water needs to coat. In some cases, we were seeing mixes that just didn't have enough water to fully hydrate. We basically just had to not make any assumptions or say, this is how we've done it in the past. We're trying to evaluate everything on a case-by-case basis.
Was it a higher water cement ratio than you traditionally would see?
Calced out with the whole back. We had a latex modified overlay on a bridge deck. Ended up getting a mix design that we've used very frequently over the past several years. Our restoration division does most of those overlays, and they do all their own batching, proportioning, mixing, and they have been successful with this mix for years. And then all of a sudden, 1L change, and now we're struggling to hit our 4,000 PSI mark at 38 days, which is what we were required to get. We even wet cured this, and we got low breaks. In 7-day wet cure, we got low breaks and huge cracks. In a low water cement ratio, traditionally, low water cement ratio cured, there shouldn't be a crack in sight. But we pulled the wet cure membrane off, and there's cracks everywhere. And then it turns out the brakes were low, and we ended up having to rip a bunch out. And that was an unfortunate sequence of events, but we definitely learned some hard lessons there.
Are you seeing any admixtures that you hadn't used before that is helping type 1L? I know you stripped everything down and troubleshoot it from there. Are you guys finding any other admixtures out there that you're trying out that you're having success to kind of help out this?
Yeah, so I know Grace.
Well, don't share anything if you're not too sure.
Grace is working on something specifically for use with the 1L as far as a plasticizer. I'm not necessarily up to date there. And that was something that has been kind of pointed out over the last year or two. The admixture industry seems to be kind of holding its breath and waiting, which isn't necessarily bad. It was kind of perceived that there wasn't a whole lot of movement from them, which there is, obviously behind the scenes. It takes a while to develop new chemicals. Turns out there's a lot of good movement there. And I think we'll start to see stuff that's going to come out that we can put into our concrete that will help address some of these issues. Terry Harris over at GCP is very engaged in a lot of this. He was at my presentation. Really valuable insights in the discussion portion of it. Knowing that they are working on it, I'm pretty sure Master Builders and Sika and all the other big players have something cooking in the works, and it's just a matter of getting it to market.
Have you heard of nanosilica?
Yep.
You looking at that?
We've done some testing in our yard, like test labs, where we're trying out different materials. the silicas like densifiers, sealers, things like that, as well as we've done a lot of, stress testing with shrinkage reducers, shrinkage comp materials, and just simple things like evaporation retarders. Trying to figure out which one works the best, and in certain areas, because they're not all going to work the same in every area. We've done a lot of test labs and really tried to make sure that we're not just assuming a material is going to work the same way that it did last year.
Yeah. But when folks, like you were saying, the admixture folks, it takes a long time for them to break through, but I think we're hesitant to use anything new. So like you said, you got to do some test labs, see what it does.
It takes a special group to be that forward. Nobody wants to spend money to try something that won't work, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to. I'm very appreciative of my management here, because they'll get behind that. They're willing to put up a little bit of cash to try things out and make sure we don't have a problem, 6 months down the road. So
yeah, it's better than testing it on a job, right? Yeah. And what I was getting at is those things you can't rush it unless you know a way to make 7 days and 28 days happen faster than the actual time, because that's what we're measured by, right? So, all right, I think we'll pause today. If you liked coming on here, we'll get you back on. We'll talk some more. But if folks want to reach out to you, Kyle, and learn about what you're up to, what's the best way?
You can go to our website, concretestrategies.com, or you can just email me directly. It's Kammer, Kammer. I always misspell that. Kammer, not Kramer, but Kammerk at concretestrategies.com. Rising tide is going to raise all ships. So we can help each other out, the better off the industry can be. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to take a call or answer an email, help out however I can.
Yeah, we all use the same producers. All right, Kyle, appreciate you coming on the show. Folks, that's it for today. Until next time, keep it concrete.